Give me a baby and I'll pay your debt. But one night made the billionaire lose control. Hello everyone. Before we begin today's story, I have a small favor to ask. Please hit subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you never miss our channel's new videos. It's quick, free, and the best way to support us in bringing you more dramatic stories. Your support means the world to us. Where are you watching from? Drop your city or country in the comments below. Thank you very much. Now, let's get back to our main character. The night air in downtown Chicago was sharp enough to sting. Streetlights flickered against the glass of the towering skyline as Evelyn Carter clutched a worn envelope to her chest, her knuckles pale from the cold and the pressure. Inside that envelope was her eviction notice, the third one this month. Behind her, the hum of passing cars blurred into nothing. Ahead of her, the entrance to a marble building gleamed like a mirage. She hesitated for a heartbeat, then pushed through the revolving doors, stepping into the world of a man who could erase her debt with a single phone call. Lucas Drake, billionaire investor. Ruthless, immaculate, untouchable. They said he could make or break a company over dinner. Tonight, he was about to make a proposal that would break something far more fragile, her pride. Evelyn's heels clicked softly on the marble as she approached his private office. She could see him through the glass dark suit, sharp jawline, and eyes that barely looked up from the papers he was signing. When he finally did, his gaze sliced through her composure like a blade. "You're late," he said. His voice was smooth, deep, and entirely without warmth. "Traffic," she murmured, even though she'd walked. "I thank you for seeing me, Mr. Drake. I don't do charity meetings after hours," he said flatly, leaning back in his chair. "So, before you beg for an extension, let's skip to the part where I tell you the answer is no." Her throat tightened. "Please," she whispered, clutching the envelope tighter. "I'll pay you back. I just need—" "You already owe me $82,000, Miss Carter." He rose, stepping around the desk until he stood just inches away. "Tell me, how do you plan to pay that back with a waitress's salary?" Her lips parted, but no words came. He studied her in silence, then exhaled slowly, his tone shifting to something darker, measured. "There is another option." She blinked, uncertain if she'd heard him right. "What?" He slid a small folder across the desk. "A proposal," he said simply. "Marry me. Bear my child. I'll settle your debts and make sure you never have to worry about money again." For a second, the world seemed to stop. The ticking clock on the wall, the faint hum of the city outside it, all faded into a dull roar in her ears. "You're joking," she breathed. "I don't joke," he replied. "This isn't about love. It's a business arrangement. You need money. I need an heir." His eyes held hers, calm and merciless. "Say yes, and you walk out of here debt-free." Evelyn's heart slammed against her ribs. She wanted to scream, to walk away, to say no. But she saw her mother's hospital bills, her sister's tuition, the landlord's threats all flashing behind her eyes like ghosts of every bad choice she'd ever made. "You can't just buy a child," she whispered. "I'm not buying," he said coolly. "I'm offering terms, everything in writing." He slid the contract toward her, the weight of it like a brand. "You have 24 hours. The warmth drained from her face as she turned toward the door, the folder clutched in trembling hands. Behind her, his voice followed, calm, controlled, final. "Think carefully, Miss Carter. You don't get a second offer." Outside, the night swallowed her whole. Snow began to fall, soft and soundless, dusting her hair like ash. Evelyn looked up at the gray sky and exhaled a shaky breath. "What have I just walked into?" she whispered. And deep inside the penthouse, Lucas Drake stood by the window, his reflection fractured in the glass, his plan in motion, and his control already slipping in ways he couldn't yet see. The next morning, Evelyn woke to the harsh buzz of her phone vibrating against the chipped nightstand. Her small apartment was freezing, the radiator groaning uselessly in the corner. She blinked at the screen, 3 missed calls from the hospital. Her stomach knotted before she even answered. "Miss Carter?" The nurse's voice came through the line, calm but tired. "Your mother's condition is stable, but we cannot continue treatment without the next payment. I am sorry, but the billing office needs confirmation today." The call ended, leaving silence that felt heavier than any sound. Evelyn sat there for a long minute, the thin blanket tangled around her legs, staring at the faded wallpaper. The contract folder from last night lay on the kitchen table, untouched. Its presence filled the room like a shadow she could not escape. She tried to eat, but the coffee tasted like ash. When she finally opened the folder, her hands trembled. Every line was precise, clean, and cold. Her name, his signature, the legal terms. 1 year. Confidentiality. A clause about conception that made her cheeks burn just reading it. It was transactional, clinical, emotionless. Yet, to her desperate eyes, each line looked like a lifeline. She closed the folder and pressed her palms to her face. "You can do this," she whispered to herself. "It is just 1 year. 1 year and Mom gets her treatment. 1 year and the debt disappears." By noon, she stood outside Drake Industries again, the winter wind cutting through her thin coat. The receptionist, perfectly composed, gave her a polite smile before buzzing her in. Lucas was waiting in the same office, sleeves rolled up, tie loosened just enough to look effortlessly powerful. He looked up as she entered, eyes unreadable. "You came back," he said quietly. Evelyn swallowed hard. "You left me no choice." "There is always a choice," he replied, though the corner of his mouth twitched, as if he had expected this outcome all along. He gestured toward the papers. "Did you read the terms?" "Every word," she said. "And you understand what you are agreeing to?" She nodded. "Then sign." His tone was final. She hesitated for one last breath, then picked up the pen. The sound of it scratching across the paper felt like a heartbeat echoing in the silence. When it was done, she slid it back toward him. Lucas studied the signature for a moment, then folded the contract neatly. "From this moment on, you are Mrs. Drake," he said. "You will move into my penthouse tonight. My assistant will handle your transition." "Transition," she repeated softly, the word tasting strange on her tongue. "This is not prison, Miss Carter. It is protection. My world has rules. If you follow them, this will go smoothly. And if I do not?" His gaze met hers, steady and cool. "Then you will not survive it." The ride to the penthouse felt unreal. The car glided through the city like a black ghost, the world outside blurring into snow and steel. When the elevator doors opened on the top floor, she stepped into a space that did not look like a home but a museum. White marble floors, floor-to-ceiling windows, the skyline of Chicago stretching endlessly beyond. "This is where I live," she murmured. Lucas's voice echoed softly behind her. "Where we live. For now." She turned, unsure how to stand, unsure how to breathe. "What do you get out of this, really?" she asked. His expression barely shifted. "Control," he said simply. "And legacy." He handed her a small keycard. "Your room is down the hall. Dinner is at 8. Be on time." Then he walked away, leaving her alone in the vast silence. Evelyn looked around, her reflection multiplied in the glass walls. She felt small, fragile, and utterly misplaced. As she set her bag down on the pristine bed, she caught her own eyes in the mirror and whispered, "You wanted a way out. This is it." But somewhere deep inside, a quiet unease whispered back this was not freedom. This was the beginning of something far more dangerous. That evening, the city glowed beneath a curtain of snow, but inside the Drake penthouse, time moved differently. Everything was immaculate, precise, almost sterile. Evelyn stood before a mirror in a black evening dress that one of Lucas's assistants had brought earlier. It fit perfectly, as if it had been measured long before she ever said yes. Her reflection looked like someone else, someone who belonged to his world. At exactly 8 o'clock, she stepped into the dining room. Lucas was already there, seated at the far end of a glass table that could have hosted a board meeting. He looked up from his phone, eyes skimming over her like a scan. "You are on time," he said simply. "You sound surprised," she replied. "Most people are not," he said, pouring himself a glass of red wine. "Sit." She obeyed, the sound of her chair echoing in the vast silence. Between them, the table gleamed under the golden light, yet the air felt cold. For a while, the only sound was the quiet clink of silverware. Evelyn tried to eat, but her appetite was buried under nerves. Finally, she spoke, her voice soft. "So, what happens now? Do you expect me to act like your wife?" Lucas's gaze did not waver. "In public, yes. In private, you do not have to pretend. This is a contract, not a romance." The words stung, though she had expected them. "And your family?" she asked. "Do they know?" "No," he said curtly. "They think I am incapable of commitment. They are not entirely wrong." His phone buzzed. He glanced at it briefly, then set it down. "Tomorrow, my lawyer will finalize your bank transfers. Your debts will be cleared by Monday." Evelyn exhaled a shaky breath. "That easy?" "Nothing about this is easy," he said quietly. "You sold one kind of freedom to buy another." She froze at his words, then looked down at her plate. "Do you always talk like that?" "Like what?" "Like you are making a deal every time you breathe." For a moment, the edge in his expression softened, as if her words had struck something deeper. But then the mask returned. "You will learn, Mrs. Drake," he said, his tone flat again, "that deals are the only language people understand." After dinner, she wandered through the penthouse. The rooms were enormous, lined with art and glass, but none of it felt alive. There were no photos, no signs of warmth, just wealth arranged in perfect order. In one corner of the living room stood a grand piano covered in dust. She ran a finger over the keys, pressing one lightly. The soft note echoed in the emptiness. "You play?" His voice startled her. Lucas stood in the doorway, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, looking more human than he had all day. "I used to," she said. "Before." "Before debt?" She nodded. "Before life got expensive." He stepped closer, studying her hands. "You have pianist fingers," he murmured. "Delicate, but stubborn." She almost smiled. "Is that your professional opinion?" "Observation," he said simply, then added, "You can use it if you like." "The piano." She blinked, surprised by the gesture. "Thank you." "Do not read too much into it," he said, walking past her toward his office. "I prefer the sound of music over silence." But as his footsteps faded down the hall, Evelyn could not shake the feeling that his words meant something more. Later that night, she stood by the window, looking out at the glittering skyline. Below, the world moved freely, while she stood locked inside a cage of glass and luxury. Somewhere in the dark reflection, she saw her own eyes, lonely, conflicted, and afraid of what she was becoming. Behind her, she could hear Lucas's low voice on a phone call, calm, commanding, all business. Yet, when he walked past her again, his gaze lingered for half a second too long. Neither said a word, but something invisible shifted in the air between them. It was not love. Not yet. It was tension. The kind that could burn or heal, depending on who gave in first. Days turned into weeks, and the rhythm of the Drake penthouse settled into something almost mechanical. Lucas spent most of his days locked in meetings or phone calls, his voice sharp and controlled, while Evelyn learned to move quietly through the polished corridors of his world. Every morning, the staff arrived like clockwork: housekeepers, chefs, assistants, all treating her with rehearsed politeness but distant eyes. She was Mrs. Drake in name, but they all knew better. She was a contract, a rumor in high heels. The first time she was asked to attend a corporate function with him, she almost said no. But his assistant, Monica, had already laid out the gown and the jewelry, silver, understated, breathtaking. "It is a charity gala," Monica said crisply. "You will arrive together. Be gracious, not friendly. The press will be watching." The words echoed through her head that night as the limousine glided toward the event. Snow still lined the sidewalks, melting under the golden lights of the city. Evelyn's reflection in the tinted window looked foreign again, elegant, poised, but hollow behind the eyes. When they stepped out of the car, flashbulbs exploded like a storm. Lucas reached for her hand without hesitation. To the cameras, it was the gesture of a devoted husband. To her, it felt like theater. Inside, the ballroom shimmered with chandeliers and crystal glass. People whispered as they walked past, some curious, others calculating. Lucas was in his element, shaking hands, exchanging words with senators, investors, and men who owned half of downtown Chicago. Evelyn followed half a step behind, smiling when required, nodding when spoken to, all while feeling the weight of invisible judgment pressing against her skin. "Mr. Drake," a woman said sweetly, appearing from the crowd. She was tall, elegant, dressed in crimson silk that clung like envy. "It has been too long." "Claudia," Lucas said, his tone polite but cool. Evelyn recognized the flicker in the woman's eyes, the kind that only appears when history lingers. Claudia's gaze slid toward her. "And you must be the new Mrs. Drake," she said. "You are quite a surprise." Evelyn smiled faintly. "Life is full of them," she replied. Lucas's hand tightened around hers, almost imperceptibly, as if to anchor her. "Excuse us," he said smoothly, steering Evelyn toward the bar. Once they were alone, she exhaled. "Friend of yours?" she asked softly. Former business partner, he said. And what kind of business was that? The kind that ended, he said simply. You handled her well. Was that a test? Every event is a test, he said. And you passed. For the first time, there was something almost warm in his voice, fleeting but real. The rest of the evening blurred into polite smiles and practiced laughter. Evelyn found herself stepping into his rhythm, matching his tone, mirroring his confidence. They moved like two pieces of choreography, perfect on the outside, entirely unreal inside. Yet somewhere between the empty toasts and the endless music, a strange feeling took root. When the car doors closed behind them later that night, she realized she was still holding his hand. Neither spoke. The city lights flickered past the window, painting soft gold lines across his face. He looked tired, older somehow, human. You did well tonight, he said finally. You make it sound like a job review, she murmured. It is, he said, though there was a faint smile at the edge of his voice. When they reached the penthouse, she slipped off her heels and exhaled. Lucas? She said suddenly, surprising even herself by using his first name. He turned from the doorway, his expression unreadable. What? Thank you, she said quietly. For what? For treating me like I belong, at least for one night. For a long moment, he just looked at her, something flickering in his eyes, a thought he would never say aloud. Good night, Evelyn, he said softly, before disappearing down the hall. She stood there for a while, alone in the silent glow of the penthouse, realizing that for the first time since she had signed that contract, she was not sure who was pretending anymore. The morning after the gala, sunlight streamed through the tall windows of the penthouse, spilling across the marble floor like liquid gold. Evelyn stirred awake to the faint aroma of coffee. She had not slept much, her mind replaying every detail of the night before the flashing cameras, Claudia's cutting smile, Lucas's hand tightening around hers. It should have meant nothing. It was part of the act. Yet, for reasons she could not explain, it lingered. In the kitchen, Lucas stood by the counter, reading something on his tablet. The sleeves of his white shirt were rolled to his elbows, and the usually perfect tie was missing. It was the first time she had seen him look remotely human in daylight. You are up early, she said quietly. He glanced up, a flicker of surprise in his eyes. I could say the same for you. Could not sleep. Because of last night? Because of everything, she admitted. He closed the tablet and leaned against the counter, studying her for a long moment. You handled yourself well. The board was impressed. You mean your investors believed our little show? That is the point, he said simply. You make this believable. Evelyn smiled faintly. Funny. You make it sound like a compliment. It is, he said. His tone was steady, but something softer hid beneath it. Later that afternoon, Monica arrived with a folder full of press clippings. Photos from the gala were already circulating Evelyn's image beside Lucas, headlines calling her the mysterious Mrs. Drake. She flipped through them, feeling a mix of disbelief and dread. I look like I belong there, she murmured. You do? Monica replied without looking up from her notes, at least in pictures. The words stung more than she expected. By evening, Lucas announced they would attend another event, a small dinner with his board of directors. They are not the press, he said. They are worse. They ask questions that matter. She frowned. And what am I supposed to do? Exactly what you did last night. Smile, listen, and do not let them see through you. Through me or through you? She asked softly. His eyes lifted from the papers, holding hers just long enough to make the room feel smaller. Both, he said. The dinner was held at a private restaurant overlooking the river. Candles flickered on every table, casting shadows that moved like secrets. Evelyn followed Lucas through the room, feeling every gaze turned toward them. A man with silver hair rose to greet them. Lucas, he said warmly, shaking his hand. And this must be the woman who finally got you to settle down. Evelyn, Lucas said. My wife. The word carried easily off his tongue, practiced but strangely natural. Throughout the evening, she watched him switch from businessman to host, charming and controlled. He introduced her, drew her into conversations, and for once, did not correct her when she spoke. When one of the board members made a subtle joke about her being a lucky girl, Lucas's voice cut through the laughter. Luck had nothing to do with it, he said calmly. I married a woman who can hold her own. The table went silent for a moment. Then someone changed the subject, but Evelyn barely heard them. Her heart thudded hard enough to drown out the clinking glasses. On the way home, the car ride was quiet. The city blurred past in streaks of light, and she kept her hands folded tightly in her lap. Finally she spoke. "You did not have to say that." "Say what?" "That thing about me at dinner." "It was true," he said. "You are stronger than you think." "You do not know me," she whispered. "Not yet," he said. When they stepped out of the elevator, she paused by the window, the skyline shimmering behind her. "This is still just business, right?" she asked softly. Lucas looked at her for a long moment, his face unreadable in the dim light. "Everything starts as business," he said, "until it does not." Then he walked away, leaving her standing there with a truth she was not ready to face. Their performance was no longer a performance at all. Winter melted into spring, and with it, the rhythm between Lucas and Evelyn began to shift. What started as silence and formality now carried small moments that neither of them planned. Sometimes it was as simple as coffee waiting on the counter when she woke, or his jacket draped over her chair after a late meeting. Other times it was a glance that lasted a heartbeat too long. One evening, a storm rolled over the city, rain lashing against the glass walls of the penthouse. Evelyn was curled on the couch with a book when the lights flickered, then went out completely. The penthouse sank into darkness, except for the pale glow of the skyline beyond. She heard footsteps behind her. "Generator will kick in soon," Lucas said. "You are not afraid of the dark, are you?" "No," she replied softly. "Just not used to being this quiet." He poured 2 glasses of wine and joined her on the couch, the flickering city lights reflecting off the glass. For a long time, neither spoke. The storm outside grew louder, a steady rhythm that filled the silence between them. "You know," she said finally, "when I first signed that contract, I told myself I would hate you." He looked at her, one brow raised. "And now?" "Now I do not know," she admitted. "You are impossible to figure out." "That is intentional," he said with a faint smile. "Control is the only thing I understand." "That sounds lonely." He studied her face for a moment, then looked away. "It is." The honesty in his voice caught her off guard. She had grown used to his armor, his precision, his distance. But now, sitting there in the half-light, he looked like a man stripped of all that a man carrying something heavy. "What happened to you, Lucas?" she asked quietly. His fingers tightened around the glass. "My father built everything I have," he said. "And he made sure I understood that love and power could not coexist. When he died, I promised myself I would never need either." "That is a terrible promise," she whispered. "It kept me alive," he said, "until now." The words hung between them, heavy and fragile. She reached out before she could stop herself, her hand brushing his. For a moment he did not move. Then his fingers turned, lacing gently through hers. No contracts, no conditions, just a touch. The generator hummed to life, lights flickering back on, but neither of them moved. The next morning, Evelyn found him in the kitchen, his sleeves rolled up, hair slightly tousled. He looked different, unguarded. "Coffee?" he asked. "You made it?" she teased. "Do not look so shocked. I am capable of basic human function." She laughed, and the sound startled both of them. It had been a long time since either had laughed like that. Later that day, Monica appeared with a tight expression. "Mr. Drake," she said, "there is a problem. Someone has been asking questions about your marriage." Lucas's jaw tensed. "Who?" "A reporter from the Chronicle. They claim to have documents, financial ones." Evelyn's pulse quickened. "What kind of documents?" "Ones that suggest this marriage is not exactly romantic," Monica said delicately. "They are threatening to run the story." Lucas's expression hardened, all traces of warmth gone. "Handle it. Pay them off if you must." "Lucas," Evelyn said, "you cannot buy everyone." "Watch me," he snapped. Then, seeing her face, his voice softened. "I will not let them destroy you." "Us," she corrected quietly. "You mean us." He hesitated, then nodded. "Us." That night, she lay awake staring at the ceiling, her heart torn between fear and something dangerously close to love. The rain had stopped, but the storm was only beginning. She could feel it. And deep down, she knew whatever this was between them, it would not stay hidden for long. By the end of that week, the first headline hit. "Billionaire marriage built on a deal?" splashed across the front page of the Chronicle, complete with photographs of Lucas and Evelyn leaving the gala, their clasped hands framed like a lie. Evelyn read it in silence, her stomach turning to ice. She could hear Lucas pacing in his office, his voice clipped and furious as he barked orders into the phone. "Find out who leaked it," he said. "I do not care what it costs." When he finally hung up, she was standing in the doorway, pale but steady. "They are not entirely wrong," she said softly. His head snapped toward her. "Do not say that. It is true, Lucas. This started as a deal. You cannot buy silence forever." "I can buy loyalty," he said coldly. "I have before." "Not mine," she said. "Not like that." His jaw tightened, but he said nothing. The next morning, the story exploded across every major network. Reporters camped outside the building, cameras flashing like gunfire. Monica tried to usher Evelyn through the private elevator, but the questions shouted from below cut deep. "Mrs. Drake, did you marry him for money? Is it true you signed a contract? Are you expecting a child?" Each word landed like a blade. By the time she reached the car, her eyes were burning. Inside the vehicle, Lucas sat motionless, staring straight ahead. "We will control the narrative," he said finally. "We will hold a press conference. You will stand beside me." "So I can lie to the entire city?" she asked. "It is not a lie," he said. "It is damage control." She turned to him, her voice trembling but firm. "You do not see it, do you? You are still trying to control everything, even me." "That is how survival works," he said, his tone rising. "Without control, everything falls apart. Maybe that is exactly what needs to happen," she said, her voice breaking. For a moment, the only sound in the car was their breathing, sharp, uneven, full of things neither could say. The press conference took place the next day in a marble atrium filled with flashing lights and microphones. Lucas stood tall, unreadable as always, while Evelyn stood beside him, her hands clasped tightly. "Our marriage is real," he said into the sea of cameras. "And personal matters are not up for public debate." The statement was measured, practiced, flawless. But when a reporter called out, "Mrs. Drake, do you agree?" Evelyn hesitated. The silence stretched, cameras clicking like thunder. Lucas turned slightly, his eyes locking onto hers, a silent command. "Say it." But something inside her broke. "We did not start as most couples do," she said finally, her voice steady but trembling at the edges. "But that does not make it meaningless." Gasps rippled through the crowd. Lucas's jaw tightened, but he did not stop her. "What I have learned," she continued, "is that money cannot buy peace, and contracts cannot build trust. Only honesty can." Then she stepped away from the microphone, from the cameras, from him. The drive back to the penthouse was silent. When they arrived, Lucas followed her inside, his voice low but shaking. "You humiliated me. I told the truth," she said. "Something you taught me was dangerous." "You think truth fixes things? It ruins them." "No," she said, turning to face him. "Lies do." He took a step closer, anger and fear blending in his eyes. "You have no idea what I have risked for this. And you have no idea what I have lost," she whispered. Then she picked up her coat, her keys, and walked toward the elevator. "Evelyn," he said, his voice cracking for the first time since she had known him. She paused but did not look back. "You wanted control," she said. "Now you have it all to yourself." The elevator doors slid shut, and Lucas was left standing in the cold glow of his own empire, surrounded by everything he had built, and suddenly aware that it meant nothing without her. 3 days passed before Lucas saw her again. The penthouse felt colder without her, the silence louder. He buried himself in work, meetings, and numbers that once made him feel untouchable. But no amount of control could drown out the echo of her last words. "You wanted control. Now you have it all to yourself." Every night, he replayed the press conference in his head, the way she had looked at him not with hate, but with disappointment. He could face scandal, lawsuits, even ruin, but not that look. Monica entered his office on the third morning with a file in hand. "The board wants an update," she said carefully. "They are nervous." The stock dropped 9%. Lucas did not look up. "Let them be nervous." "There is more," Monica continued. "The reporter who started the story, he was paid, but not by a rival company." Lucas's head snapped up. "Then who?" She hesitated. "By your cousin Mark. He wanted leverage in the inheritance dispute." Lucas's jaw clenched. "Of course. He always hated that I got everything. He said if you were exposed, the trust clause would shift in his favor." "He thought destroying my marriage would undo me," Lucas said bitterly. He was half right. He stood, pushing the chair back. Find him. Lucas, Monica said softly. Maybe you should find her instead. He froze. Evelyn? You have not even tried, she said. The world sees a man who lost control of his narrative. Maybe it is time to show them a man who found his heart instead. The words lingered long after she left. That evening, he drove without direction, the city lights blurring through the windshield. He found himself outside the small cafe where Evelyn used to go before their deal began. Through the rain-streaked window, he saw her hair tied back, sleeves rolled up, helping an older woman close the shop. No cameras, no luxury, no mask. Just her. He stepped inside quietly. She looked up, startled, eyes widening when she saw him. Lucas, she breathed. What are you doing here? I had to see you, he said. You left. You told me to, she said. Not with words, but with everything else. He nodded slowly. You are right. I spent my life treating people like assets, even you. But you were the only thing I could not control. Her eyes glistened. Then why did you try? Because I was afraid, he said, his voice raw. Afraid that if I let myself feel anything real, I would lose everything I built. And did you? Yes, he whispered. But maybe that is the first honest thing I have ever done. The old woman excused herself quietly, leaving them alone. For a long moment, neither moved. The story is out there, Evelyn said softly. People will keep talking. Let them, he said. The truth is not a weapon anymore. It is a start. What about your company, your name? I can rebuild those, he said. But I cannot rebuild you. Her breath caught. Lucas. He stepped closer, taking her hand gently. No contracts. No promises written in ink. Just one question: if I asked you to come home, would you? She searched his face, the sincerity in his eyes, the vulnerability that had never existed before. Only if you understand that home is not your penthouse, she said. Home is trust. Then I will earn it, he said quietly. Every day. A faint smile broke through her tears. You do not make things easy, do you? Nothing worth keeping ever is. Outside, the rain softened to a drizzle, and the city lights reflected like stars in puddles. For the first time, Lucas did not feel powerful or broken. He felt human. And as Evelyn leaned against him, the sound of the storm faded into something softer, the sound of two people finally choosing something real. 6 months later, the world had changed quietly, piece by piece. The scandal that once dominated headlines had faded into yesterday's noise, replaced by new stories, new distractions. But for Lucas and Evelyn, everything that mattered had begun again from scratch. They no longer lived in the glass penthouse that had once towered above the city like a monument to pride. Instead, they bought a modest brownstone in a quiet neighborhood near the river, where mornings smelled like fresh coffee and rain, not polished marble. Evelyn opened a small community art studio there, teaching painting to children and adults who could not afford expensive classes. The laughter and colors that filled the space became her new rhythm, her way of breathing again. Lucas often dropped by after his meetings, rolling up his sleeves to help clean brushes or fix broken easels. The board had begged him to return to Drake Industries, and he did, but not as the man he had been. He rebuilt the company from the inside out, grounding it in honesty, transparency, and programs for families and education. For the first time, he cared less about the bottom line and more about the people behind it. The press called it redemption. He called it peace. One evening, as the sun dipped low over the river, Lucas arrived early at the studio. Evelyn was alone, cleaning paint off her hands, her hair tied loosely with a ribbon. She looked up and smiled when she saw him. "You are early," she said. "I finished work ahead of schedule," he replied. "Apparently, when you stop trying to control the universe, it gives you an extra hour." She laughed softly. "You are learning." "Slowly," he said, walking closer. "But I am a good student." He reached into his coat pocket and pulled out a small box. She froze. "Lucas." "Before you say anything," he interrupted gently, "this is not about contracts or obligations. There are no conditions, no signatures, just something real." He opened the box, revealing a simple gold ring, nothing like the one from their first arrangement. No diamonds, no extravagance, just sincerity. "You once told me that home is trust," he said. "So here I am, asking you to build it with me. For real this time." Her eyes shimmered, tears catching the last light of sunset. You already have, she whispered. He slipped the ring onto her finger, his hand trembling slightly. I never believed in second chances, he said quietly. Until you. She leaned in, resting her forehead against his. Then do not waste it. Outside, children's drawings fluttered against the windows, a heart, a skyline, two figures holding hands beneath the rain. The same rain that had once separated them now felt like a promise. Weeks later, their wedding was small, intimate, nothing like the spectacle of the first. No reporters, no contracts, only close friends and the sound of laughter. Monica stood by with a grin, whispering. Finally, as they exchanged vows that were not scripted but spoken from the heart. When Lucas kissed Evelyn under the string lights, the guests cheered, but for him, the world went silent. In that quiet, he heard only her heartbeat and the soft echo of everything they had survived. Afterward, as they danced barefoot under the lights, Evelyn whispered, "Do you ever think about how it all started?" He smiled. "Every day. I made a deal for control and ended up losing everything I never knew I needed." She laughed through her tears. "And what did you gain?" "You," he said simply. The rain began again, gentle and steady, soaking their clothes and their laughter, but neither moved. They had once been strangers bound by a contract. Now they were partners bound by choice. And as the night deepened, Lucas realized that for the first time in his life, he was not chasing power or perfection. He was home,